Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 going on 17 novels of suspense. My current book is All This Could Be Yours, so casually displayed on the door behind me. And I have to tell you that today it was nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark Award by Mystery Writers of America. Thank you, Amy. And I'm so happy about that. I know it looks like I'm sitting down in a chair, but I'm really kind of floating. I really am floating. So that's great. And thank you all for making that happen. Today, I have the absolute joy of introducing you to the amazingly talented Amy Pease, whose brand new book, WILDWOOD, is just out. And this is, it's from Amy Bestseller Books at Atria. And you know that is absolutely the sign of a wonderful story and a fabulous storyteller. You can always rely on that imprint. And I am so glad that Amy is here today. I said Emily Bestseller, right? Is that what I said? Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. Emily Bestseller Books, Atria Books, all good, fabulous. I love this book. And I keep comparing it to William Kent Kruger and Heather Gudenkauf. And I see that pervasively. Amy, what's your sense of why you're put on the shelf with those iconic books as equally good as those?
Well, I think that a lot of that has to do with the setting. So William Kent Kruger's books are all set in northern Minnesota, and my books are set in northern Wisconsin. And it's an interesting culture in that neck of the woods that I think is a little bit exotic to people who aren't from there. But I've also learned that people who live in that region where I live are really, really loyal to their authors. And I think that that's where that comes in.
That's so interesting. And I wonder whether the people, and you're from that region, the people who come from that region are really, really loyal to the region. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's I think people would think we're making some of this stuff up, that this seems the extent of our hospitality gets a little out of hand sometimes, so there are parts in Wildwood and also the first book in the series, Northwoods, where just knee-jerk habit, Eli, the main character, is inviting people for a drink or for dinner, or the friendliness is so ingrained in the culture.
And also, I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes that part of the country so inviting, but it also can make it be risky. And you're so good at revealing what might be underneath that welcoming and hospitable outside.
Yeah, it makes the contrast of crime so much stronger when you've got this idyllic place. When you add criminal elements, when you add darkness, it gives a really good contrast, I think, and it lends itself well to crime fiction.
And that is why Wildwood is such a wonderful book. And we'll talk more about that in about 2 seconds. But first, let me remind you that there will be a giveaway of this wonderful book, Wildwood, at the end of the show. So leave a question or a comment or anything, just general adulation for Amy Pease in the questions and the comments, and we will spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show, and one of you will take this wonderful book home. Do not miss this, you all. This is really gorgeously written, and we'll talk more about that instantly. I read it. I was instantly drawn in, and then I gave it to my husband, who also equally loved it. So this is one of those books that crosses all lines. And if you love a good mystery with fantastic setting and really ingenious and endearing story, main characters, this is a marvelous story for you. We've been bringing you marvelous stories on a Mighty Blaze for more than 5 years now. If you're new to Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the wonderful powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us learning about new books and meeting new authors and staying up close and Zoom personal with our favorite authors, and maybe meeting a new favorite author, and that may well be Amy Pease after you read this book. I guarantee you will absolutely love it. I have 10 more seconds to talk about Amy. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy, and then we'll finally let Amy talk. Amy Pease is the author of Northwoods and its sequel, Wildwood, small town thrillers rooted in the natural beauty and close-knit communities of her native Wisconsin. She's a nationally recognized HIV specialist and longtime nurse practitioner. She is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and the Madison Writers Studio. She lives in Wisconsin with her husband and 2 children. The New York Times Book Review called Northwoods an indelible debut, and she keeps up that status with Wildwood. It is absolutely unforgettable. The characters, the setting, and the story will linger with you long after the book is over. So I know this is the hardest question for an author, but Amy, tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So Wildwood and the Northwoods series are what I would say is contemporary small town police procedural. So in other words, it's cops versus bad guys in a small northern Wisconsin town. And it has to do with conspiracies in this case.
Yeah, the idea of the conspiracy in this gorgeous idyllic setting is so gorgeously drawn because the characters are so relatable and the conspiracy is so realistic that we are instantly drawn into this story. The characters, I mean, I just love them. I fell in love with Eli North and his mom, the sheriff. That is the most ingenious crime-fighting duo ever. Can you tell us the genesis of each of them and how you decided to make a mother-son team?
Sure. So Eli sort of came out of my brain fully formed. And the way that the story came about and he came about is that I challenged myself to come up with an image, just anything that popped into my mind. And it was a melancholy man floating in a lake on a warm summer night when music starts playing across the water. And that was the opening chapter of Northwoods. That was Eli North. And at that time I was kind of writing by the seat of my pants, just seeing what was coming out of my mind onto the page. And in the second chapter, in walked his mother, the sheriff. So I wish I had someone that I'm relating this to in real life, but it really just came out of my imagination.
Well, I love that the most because when you talk about that very evocative scene of the man floating on the water and the music starts, that is from an author's emotion. That's not something that you're trying to think of. And as you say, he sprung fully formed. The emotion involved in putting him on the page and putting his mother on the page and putting their relationship on the page. When you first met his mom, so you knew she was his mom, is that correct?
Yep.
And talk a little bit about how you decided to make essentially her his boss.
One thing that I think pretty much everyone can relate to is the relationships between parents and children, children and other children, these family relationships. And I thought it would be interesting to include something so relatable in something that most of us can't relate to, which is police work. And you said relatable earlier. That's something that was always my goal with all of the characters.
And the conflict, though, between how a mother treats her son and how a son treats his mother, and how a sheriff treats a deputy and how a deputy treats his boss is such a fun thing to follow because it's difficult for them to put the boundaries on those relationships. But then it becomes that's just their life. This is all there is, and this is what they do. And for better or for worse, they have each other with a generally common goal. How did that evolve to you? I mean, I read a review. One review of this book said, a woman said she loved this book because usually mothers are terrible. And she loved that this was a good mom. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, Eli and Marge, the sheriff's department is woefully underfunded. So really, it's just Eli and Marge doing all the law enforcement for this small county in Wisconsin. And all day, every day, 365 days a year, they're pretty much on duty. And thankfully, Eli naturally respects his mom, defers to her. Does what she says just because she's usually right. So that makes it a little bit easier to do that. Um, yeah, I think that their relationship is maybe unusually healthy.
But his mother, I mean, Eli, the gorgeously named Eli North, has some, is a damaged person and has some trauma in his past. And one of the very sweet things about the book is how caring and careful his mother is to make sure her son is okay. That mother-son relationship is something that can't be overcome by their work. Can you talk talk a little bit about Eli's background, and then we'll talk about his mom's background. But let's talk a little bit about Eli's background and how you created him and why you gave him the personality elements that you did.
Yeah, when we start in Northwoods, the first book in the series, Eli is seriously not okay. He is a war veteran. He had a traumatic experience happen to him while he was deployed. He's come home. He lost his job as a game warden through no fault of his own. And this once strong, physically healthy, mentally healthy man is now hit rock bottom. Um, and the alcoholic, traumatized veteran is a common familiar trope in crime fiction. But the thing I wanted to include with Eli that was a little bit different is that instead of being, kind of a pain, instead of making other people's lives miserable, he's trying so desperately to hide all of these problems, to pretend like everything's okay, to not burden his family with this nightmare he's going through. So I thought that was a little bit different. I thought that was quite realistic, actually. So that's why I went in that direction. And as far as Marge, the conflict in book one and somewhat in book two is that she is trying so hard to figure out what to do to help him. And she's realizing that loving him isn't enough when he's, suffering from severe depression and alcoholism. Not only that, but she needs his help with this investigation. And so here she's on this fence between, I know that he needs something to direct his attention to, something to get him out of bed in the morning, but I'm also letting him work knowing that he might be drunk on the job. So what do I do?
Also, to re-traumatize him by seeing people who are in a terrible situation or murdered or some sort of scene that might trigger him again. And I do love the layering and the metaphor of that this beautiful setting is hiding something ugly. And Eli, trying to do the best he can on the outside, is also trying to hide something ugly. So it shows the layers that we all have. And his mother has a past as well.
She does. She has her own trauma from a long time ago. And it was something she never shared with Eli until he reached his breaking point in Northwoods. And that was, I think, her last ditch attempt to relate with him, to show him maybe the way to survive. And that wasn't war related, but it was domestic related.
I see you're being very, very careful here, and I understand why. This is the second in a series, Wildwood and then Northwoods, the beginning. You can easily start with Wildwood. There is nothing that you need to know from book one in the series. You can hop right into Wildwood if you want, and then Northwoods will be equally fabulous. How top of mind was it for you to make sure that these books were absolutely standalones. Did you care about that? Did you take care of? You must have.
I did. I knew that I had to find a way to do that. And I made what I would say is a bit of a rookie mistake with Northwoods in that I left some plot threads untied at the end of Northwoods, thinking I would carry them into Wildwood. I thought that would be interesting, these larger plot arcs. That was really difficult. I mean, I had written myself a little bit into a corner by doing that in Wildwood. And so I had to figure out a way to finish those threads, but make it so that the reader didn't have to see the beginning of the threads and make it all into an interesting book that made sense.
It all seemed so easy when you started, right? And then you
Yeah.
got to the reality of it. I do think that going back to what you brought up about the fact that Eli has PTSD and as alcoholism as a result of that can feel like something that we've read before. But I can tell you, Blazers, that this is not like that. Eli is lovely. He's a caring man that we instantly feel for and instantly care about. He's so believable, and your writing of it is so loving and light-handed. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to write that and how you must know so much about that?
Well, I've been a healthcare provider for 25 years, and compassion really comes with the job. And part of that is because you have to provide care to people, all people who show up to your clinic or your hospital or whatever. And sometimes those people are not very likable, and sometimes they are not very good people, but you dig deep for compassion. And I think also there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding mental health and substance abuse that I wanted to push back against. Because, first of all, the stereotypes really aren't particularly true, but also they don't make for good fiction either. So that is where that came from. I I see some comments sometimes about, oh, it would never happen that a sheriff's deputy would be allowed to be drunk on the job. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I that is happening every day, especially in a place like Wisconsin where alcohol use is much higher than anywhere else. Yeah, so this was me trying to put a more human face on these things.
Compassion was the word I was so unsuccessfully searching for, and thinking about it, that the whole book is infused with compassion from moment one when we meet one of the pivotal characters of the book. Can you talk a little bit about her and why you started with her in the book?
Yeah. That was I went back and forth on whether to start with her. So Trinity is not one of the main characters in the series. Eli is and his mom Marge. Trinity is Wildwood's third character. And the investigation by Marge and Eli is about Trinity's disappearance. Um, I guess this is another example where I chose somebody who maybe in real life would have been marginalized by society. So this is a young woman who's had tough times in her life. Um, and the opening scene is her trying to get care at a rehab clinic, and they turn her away in a very discouraging way, discouraging to her, and yet she perseveres, and the book is really about her and about that.
And when in this scene, which is so beautifully portrayed, she meets a not very compassionate intake worker who
Mhm.
gets her name wrong and sort of deals with her as if she doesn't exist. And she feels like a commodity. And it is such a heartbreaking scene. And it is such an entree into a world that, many of us, if we're lucky, will never see. And you really help us understand how someone who is asking for help and gets turned away, the despair they must feel. Was that part of your goal?
Oh, yes, yes. So even within healthcare, there's a lot of discrimination, a lot of bias. And I mean, I've had so many patients over the years who've tried to get care elsewhere, and have been turned away for the way they look, the way they talk, even things like their accent. Um, so I thought that that was kind of a chilling thing, and I wanted to include that, like pull the curtain aside a bit on that.
And you also, by making her be have artistic talents and being a lovely person who just took some wrong turns and had some bad luck, it's sort of a there but for fortune story. We see it like that.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, you know, this person has a surface, but beneath it there's more. And that's obviously that's themes in my book is what's beneath the surface, the layers beneath the surface, and that's including with Trinity.
Exactly, and such a good job. And Trinity as the third character in this book, cleverly named. I can't resist talking about Wisconsin though, just for a minute again. Um, in the beginning of Wildwood, there's let me see if I can find it. I think I did mark it. You say something that Eli, it's the crack of dawn. Eli's out chopping wood, and I won't be able to read it without my glasses. But you talk about how he's chopping wood in the forest, and he hears a sound, and there's this gorgeous idyllic scene. Then you indicate something like it's just like the beginning of a Grimm Brothers fairy tale. Um,
Yeah.
and I love that so much because it is the setting of a fairy tale where evil things happen and dark forces occur and the hero has to save the day. I mean, how intentional was it when you referred to the Grimm Brothers fairy tale?
I don't think it was intentional in that I was thinking, it would be great as if I did. It wasn't that, but I just have this idea of Eli and Marge as people you can root for. Like these people feel heroic to me. They feel like people I want to know. Um, but there's another investigator who comes from Chicago. Her name is Alyssa. And Alyssa is like born and raised in a rough part of Chicago. She doesn't know anything about the Northwoods. She just kind of rolls her eyes at all of it. And so there's a few comments from her throughout the book where she's like, this crazy place. It's like this little fairy tale. Everyone is sitting there toasting marshmallows around the campfire and singing Kumbaya. This has to be fake.
And it's wonderful that you bring her in to be the critic, as one reason to be the critic of this, which also emphasizes how good it can be and how very special it can be. Going back to Alyssa and why she's there. The central, you were talking about that this is about a conspiracy. The central crime that Marge and Eli are working on. Where did you get the idea or for that particular kind of thing? And I want to be careful about what it is and let you decide how much to tell. But did that come from real life?
Absolutely. So I kind of joke when I do author events and talk about Wildwood that, like hang on to your hat because this book is about Medicare fraud.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Well,
which
exciting.
I don't think it's a spoiler because it's early in the book that we learn that. But there is a lot of shady stuff in healthcare. There really is. And in Northwoods, we are introduced to a shady pharmaceutical company. But things like phantom clinics is something I bring up in Wildwood, and that's basically identity theft where these bad actors are scamming insurance companies for money. So there are so many things that I'm not sure people would believe it if they heard it, if they don't have a little bit of insight into what healthcare is like. I remember with Northwoods when I had the pharmaceutical thing, I told my husband about the plot and he was like, that just seems really far-fetched that a pharmaceutical company would be, deliberately harming people. And and then probably 6 months later, the whole Purdue Pharma Sackler family OxyContin thing came out, and I was like, I told you this stuff happens.
As an investigative reporter, I've been a television reporter for 40 years, and I, fully understand the corruption that can go on in any industry, and the healthcare industry, definitely so. I had to write a story for television once I had to make it interesting on the demutualization of insurance companies. And
Oh,
I remember saying to my producer, if we can do this, we can do anything. But
yes.
but the thing that makes those kinds of things fascinating is that they come from human greed or human manipulation or or a search for power or someone who has the motivation to try to beat the system and take advantage of other people to benefit themselves. That's never boring. And that's what this is about.
Yeah, I think it's very chilling, especially when the people who are doing harm are people that we all see as um, people who are there to help, that are there to support the vulnerable, not take advantage of them.
Yes. And so, I mean, healthcare fraud, that's one thing, but people who are taking underprivileged people or older people's money for themselves, that is interesting. And that's a compelling plot, which you handle so gorgeously. I mean, the other thing, a couple of things I want to talk about, and then we'll take your questions, you all, is the dialogue is so authentic and so genuine sounding. How do you think about how people talk to each other, and what do you take into account as your dialogue doesn't feel like written dialogue that an author wrote? It feels like people really talking.
Well, that's great. That's exactly the goal. Sometimes I bet I think there are times when I have to sit there and talk out loud to myself, have a conversation with myself and see what I would say, because these are folks in my part of the world. We have our own, ways we communicate, and I wanted to keep it true to Wisconsin.
And not only true to Wisconsin, but true to mother son, son mother, someone, the way we talk to a boss, the way we talk to an outsider is different from how we talk to our best friend or our son. Do you keep that in mind as I mean, you were talking about Alyssa and how she sees, here she is, a fish out of water, but thinks she's a big fish. How do you
Yeah.
talk about how she deals with the world versus how I mean, Marge is hilarious, and some of her asides are so funny, um,
Yeah.
and so authentic. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's a scene where Marge is interviewing I guess you'd say, person of interest. And this person of interest just does not want to be there, is getting distracted. And she makes a comment about Eli's coat that he's wearing. And it's some, Carhartt utility jacket that he got at Fleet Farm. And they get on this side tangent during this interview about, what are the best work boots and everything. And that kind of stuff just seems so
Yeah.
realistic. And I try to be careful about my dialogue, that it doesn't all sound the same. Like, not all the characters talk in the same way. And you're right. We all talk differently. We code switch. We talk differently with different people in our life. And I wanted that to ring true in my fiction too.
It definitely does. If you just joined us, lucky you, we're talking about Wildwood by Amy Pease. I want to go back to the setting briefly because it is so beautiful and the nature is so gorgeous. But what is it about a small town where everyone knows each other? What is it about a small town that allows crime to be rampant? And what is it about a small town like this that allows these kinds of things to go on under the surface?
Oh, there's a tremendous level of trust when you live in a small town. So, you don't lock your doors. There's a few times where I talk about that in Wildwood. You don't lock your doors. You probably don't lock your car doors. Um, you tell people things that, they could potentially use against you. You go about your day assuming that everything is going to be fine. And with Wildwood, it's based off a clinic in the book called Wildwood Clinic, which is a world-class health organization that just happens to be located in the northwoods of Wisconsin, which is kind of based on Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, which Rochester, Minnesota is nothing except it has Mayo Clinic, which is one of the best places in the world. And so that was a perfect hiding place, a perfect cover for bad deeds that are done beneath the surface.
And this story is so such a good plot. I mean, it's just such a good story and such a good mystery, and twisty and surprising and wise, and a gorgeous procedural in every way. But the writing is so poetic, and so lyrical. And I wonder how you think about balancing essentially a police procedural murder mystery and make it still beautiful, because you did.
Well, thank you. That is the very kind words. I'm extremely critical of my writing style, and so I always aim to have my prose be better.
Mm.
I don't want it just to be a story. I don't want it to be flat on the page. I want it to be an emotional experience for readers. And that comes across a lot better if the writing flows properly.
I mean, it is an emotional experience. And I love that you talked earlier about how the genesis of Eli was that you saw him floating on a river, on a lake or river in the summer when there was music. I mean, that shows, I mean, that's poetry, and that shows you are delving into emotion and personality first, and not
Oh, yeah.
some plot first. Although you're terrific on plot, I love that. I think that's so authentic, which makes me, and then I'll have one or two more questions, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So nice to see you all. I forgot to welcome you. Renee is here, and Sue Street, and Robin Stull, Julie Brinkley is here. I'm searching through here. It's so nice to see you all. Emily is here, and Sherry, and Lori, and Katie. Oh, so nice to see you all. Kathy Lanigan, Lori Hernandez is here, and Renee Herskowitz. I love this. Sherry Ribach is here. You all are great. It's marvelous. And this is absolutely such a terrific book. But I wonder, I mean, your first book, Northwoods, came out to phenomenal acclaim. And this equally so. And you weren't a writer for much of your life.
No.
A little bit about how you wound up in this profession as well.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, like 8 or 9, two things happened at about the same time. One was that my great grandpa gave me his 1908 first edition copy of Anne of Green Gables, which Anne wants to be a writer. And then I also won a essay competition in school. And I don't remember what the essay was about, but I remember that my teacher at the time told me that I was a good writer. And when you're that age, you just internalize everything so much and you think that adults know what they're talking about. So ever since then, I kind of thought of myself as a writer. And I would just devour anything I could get my hands on about the craft of writing. And of course, I read a ton as well. And then I got to be about 40 years old, and I'm like, well, I probably should start writing something. And that's when I got the idea for Northwoods. So Northwoods is the first thing I've written, but I practiced in my head for a very long time.
You practiced in your head. I mean, obviously your teacher was so right. How do you practice in your head? And what was it that made you think, I mean, it's really an audacious idea to write a book. What made you think, oh, I can do this?
My mom always told me and my sister, you can do anything you set your mind to. And I guess I set my mind to doing this. I thought, I like what I do for my healthcare career, but I always felt like writing was maybe something that came more naturally to me. I think I'm a writer who also is a nurse versus the other way around. Um, I don't know. When I read other people's books, I would analyze things for better or for worse. Um, it was always on my mind, and I loved any information I could get my hands on, which I think is a sign that it's something that I really love and I could spend time doing. Because it takes a long time to write books, obviously, as you know.
It does. It does. I mean, talk about the love that you feel for this book and these characters completely, oh, my ring light is in this, completely comes through on the page. It is such a pleasure to read your book. And I'm so honored and thrilled to have found this, Amy. Thank you for being here. I want to take some questions from the audience before we get to the wheel of fun. Who has a question? Hi, Katie. Says, do you see yourself in, what a good question. Do you see yourself in any of the characters?
Oh gosh, all of the characters are me. They're all me, for better or for worse. Um, I think that Alyssa is sort of a grumpier version of me. The book is a little bit dark. Well, some people would say it's really dark. I don't say it's never bleak. But I'm a really cheerful person, so I must darken it a little bit for the book.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not bleak, but it is dark. Scary, sad, disturbing things happen. But it, you just walk such a line between reality and storytelling. And
Yeah, that line, I think knowing where that line is and where other lines are in creative pursuits is where the story really comes alive. That's the trick, is finding the line.
you have done it, my dear. Who else has a question? When is your Renee? Hey, Renee says, when is your favorite time to write?
I have to squeeze my writing in anytime I can find.
Mm.
If I had the perfect schedule, I probably would write in the mid-morning and to mid-afternoon, but I oftentimes have to get up at like 5 in the morning and write for a while before I have to get the kids on the bus. I cannot write at night after the kids are in bed, though. No way. My brain, I will just stare at the screen and nothing comes out.
I love how each of us has our way of writing. If I had to write early in the morning, you just find me with my head clonked on the computer. But at midnight, I can really do it. So it just, each of us has our writing metabolisms, and we just have to search them out. We just have to
Yes.
search them out. I think yours is very brave, though. Writing before the kids go off to school, I'm in awe. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Who
I
else?
don't like getting up at 5 in the morning,
No.
especially not in the winter.
I know you describe Eli getting up early in the morning and talk about how the seasons change, and when kids go to school in the darkness, that sounds like it comes from reality.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
What has one more question? Let's take, if you have time, Amy, to take one more question.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Sherry says, what genre do you like to read?
I read all sorts of genres, although short answer is that I really like historical romance, especially. But what I've found is that the story, the plot, the genre doesn't really matter as much as the voice. So, and that's something you don't really get from the back flap, like the book description. You got to open the book up and read the first page or two. And when a book just grabs me, if the voice just grabs me, that's the book I read.
And it's interesting that the voice that grabs everyone on the first page of Wildwood is not one of the two series characters. And then you bring in Eli, and then you bring in the mom, and we are completely hooked. Absolutely instantly. I know you all are really, really eager to get your hands on this book. Let's do the Wheel of Fun and see who's going to win one of these. Not this particular one, because I'm keeping this book for me because I love it. But one of you will win your very own copy from the publisher of Wildwood by Amy Pease. And the winner is, I will hum if we don't have music. And the winner is Laura Huerta. Laura Huerta, wonderful dog mom, which is so great. There's a great dog in Wildwood. So this is a wonderful book for you to read, Laura. That is great. And you know what to do to email me. You'll get the instructions to email me, and I'll email Amy's people at Emily Bestler Books, and they will get you a copy of this. The rest of you, you know what to do. Run, 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 click, click, click. I'm telling you, you will absolutely love Wildwood. If you love William Kent Kruger and Heather Gudenkauf, and who doesn't, you will absolutely love this book. Amy, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we saw each other when last at BoucherCon?
Yeah, in Nashville, in the terrarium.
It was a hotel that was in a dome, and it was massive. It was like the size of 4 hotels and 27 restaurants and 32 swimming pools, and it was all inside. It was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, there was a river. There was a river and forests inside.
A river with boats, right?
Yes, people kayaked. Yeah.
So weird.
Yep.
Real life, it cannot compare to inside whatever that place was in Nashville. But I'm honored to have met you there, and I'm glad we got to be pals and stick together. And I can't. Is there another book? Is there a third book?
Yes, the third book in the series is with my editor right now. It's going to be Eli and Marge back again, and actually Alyssa back again too.
Send that right to me. I'm going to my mailbox right now.
It is in first draft format, so
I'll
I'll
get a
give it
quote.
I'll give it a few rewrites and then I'll send it off.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. You all, Amy, thank you for being here today. You all, thank you for being here today. You're just such a great audience, and it is so wonderful to see you gather here every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, it's going to be a surprise. We're not quite sure who's here yet. We're juggling some wonderful authors, but you know, you can always rely on us to bring you a very great book and a very wonderful author. Speaking of very wonderful, you are all the best. So we will see you next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. And until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time.